Hi everyone. I'm really delighted to be here in Tallinn. I travelled from the UK with my husband and my two boys, and we've been exploring the city the last few days, so it's been really amazing. Today I'm going to be giving a talk on using brain science to build better products. Before we get into that, just a light introduction about myself. So I am currently a test team leader at Sage. I've been there for over 3 years now, and prior to that, I've had various roles in the testing industry. Over the last couple of years, I've got involved in learning from others in the testing community, and also started to share my own knowledge. One of the projects I'm quite proud of is a book called Testing Stories, which you can find on LeanPub. This is a collection of stories from 30 software testers around the globe, and it all goes to charity, so do go and check it out. What you may find interesting about me, though, is that my background is not in technology. I do not have a degree in computer science. What I do have, though, is a degree in neuroscience. And over the last couple of years, I've really started to leverage that. So this leads onto my opening statement. We can use brain science to help us build better products. When we understand how people feel and how they think, we can create products for people in mind. In my experience, what I have observed in teams is that sometimes we can tunnel vision into the technology, the test automation, the CI/CD pipelines, and so on, all of which are really important and a part of the puzzle, but it's not the complete picture. So this is where I want to talk about who we're building for. And what I'd like to do is reference the Agile Testing Condensed book by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory. This is a brilliant book. I use it as a reference guide all the time. And what it has is the business-facing, technology-facing, guiding development, and critiquing the product. We have a lot to think about. No wonder we tunnel vision sometimes. So what I want to focus on is the business-facing and who we're building for. So how do you stop the tunnel vision? One suggestion I've got for you is write this down somewhere. How do people feel and think about your product? Answer this question yourself as a software tester. Answer it in your team. Answer it as a business. So why does this all matter? So if someone feels that your product is bad, they find it really frustrating, then they might not use this anymore. The market is quite competitive, and it means they'll simply go elsewhere. So it does affect the business revenue. So these things are really important. So in this talk today, I'm going to cover 4 things. Just as a bit of an introduction, I'm going to go over some facts of the brain structure and function. And then we're going to go into how the brain interprets our environment. There's a lot of things we could talk about the brain. 2 things that I want to focus on today with you is memory and the power of emotion-driven testing. So first, let's go into a bit about the brain. I've got 4 facts for you. So the first fact is that there are 3 parts of the brain. So you've got the cerebrum. So if you touch this, this is quite soft and squishy. You've got the cerebellum at the back, and this is quite hard, and that controls your sort of movement and coordination. And then you've got the brainstem that is involved in automatic processes like breathing and your heart rate. So fact number 2, your brain is so large that over time what it has done is evolved to have bumps and grooves all over it, so it fits in your head. Fact number 3, the brain can be split into 2. So it's got the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. What you may find interesting is that the left side of your brain does not control the left side of your body. In fact, it's the opposite. So the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and so on. So fact number 4, one side of your brain is more dominant than the other. So some of you in the audience may feel that you're stronger in terms of creativity, whereas the other half of you may think you're stronger in sort of logical. So related to fact number 1 about the cerebrum, this can be split up into different lobes. So you've got 4 in total. So you've got the frontal lobe, so that's involved in decision-making processes. You've got the parietal lobe at the top, that's involved in sensory information. You've got the temporal lobe around your ears, and that's involved in auditory information and memory. And then you've got the occipital lobe at the back, that is involved in vision. So hopefully I've given you a couple of facts just to get into this talk a little bit. So now we're really going to dig deep into this and think about how it relates to software testing. So let's explore how the brain interprets our environment. So in total, you've got 5 senses. 4 of those are located around your head. You've got your sight, your hearing, your smell, and your taste. And the other sense is your touch that's located all around your body. So how I want you to think interpreting our environments or our product is that we're registering information through our senses, we're processing it, and then we're doing something with it. So I'm going to do a little bit experiment now, and we're going to go through a couple of exercises together, so do get involved. So which line is longer? Have a look at this briefly. So hands up for A, hands up for B, hands up for C. That's really interesting. I didn't think I could trick a group of software testers. In fact, if you got a ruler and measured these out, they're all the same length. So for some reason, the arrows make it feel that it's longer. So just we're thinking about it, we're registering information, we're processing it, and then doing something with it. So I've got one more. So what do you see? Shout out what you see. Rabbit? And a duck, yeah. So again, we're looking at this, we're registering it, and then we're shouting out what we're doing with it. So now I've got a couple of examples. So when I was doing some research, I came across this website. It's called the world's worst website ever.com. So do go and check it out. A group of designers created this to basically break every design principle there is. But if we look at this, basically there's a lot going on. There's too much. So now I want to think about some other examples. So in the UK, we have the news, the BBC News website. And every time I go onto this, I don't know, I just get super confused by it. There's quite a lot of different menus going on. We've got about 3 in total. So I think what I would like to see from that website is just to simply highlight that I'm on the news website. So when I look at this, I can clearly see where I am on that website, and then I can explore further. So another example is Homebase. So this is like a do-it-yourself store. You might have these in Estonia. And this is renowned for being a really bad design, like super bad. You can't find anything on here. So I did an exercise. I just wanted to browse around kitchens and have a look, maybe get a new kitchen installed. I clicked on it, and this is exactly what I saw. It doesn't really look any different from the homepage, really. So you have this big image, and what you would have to do is scroll all the way down to find the information that you need. So what I would suggest is for Homebase to make it easier for us so that we can register our information easier, get rid of that top banner, and then just simply have the browse. So I wanted to think about some examples that do it well. So you may recognize this as the Facebook website. So I went on to Facebook, create a new account, click sign up. Here you can see that there are exclamation marks, like bringing your attention to that area of the site. What I find really interesting about this, though, is that it has "What's your name?" It's clearly directing the user to where they need to fill out first. So remembering this, to guide your user's attention to where you want them to look at first in the application. Another good example is I found Booking.com. It's fairly simple, isn't it? There's not a lot going on. You can see that I'm on the stays, sign in, register, and then there's a clear search box. So I think my advice would be, try and keep it simple and not overcomplicate things. So my tips are, when you're doing your testing, maybe in the design stage or requirements, note down any frustrations or confusions you have when testing, and then discuss these with your team. And then maybe you can come up with some different examples, like the home-based example that I gave. So just as a bit of a recap, so what am I registering through my senses? How does my brain process this? And what do I do next? Right, okay, so about halfway through now. So we've explored 4 facts of the brain, a little bit about the function of it, and then we thought about how our brain interprets our environment, thinking about actual products, what's bad design, what's good design. Now let's go into memory. So memory is all about how we store and we retrieve information. So what I want to talk to you about is the multi-store memory model by Atkinson and Schifrin. They created this quite a while ago in 1968. So what you have is your stimuli coming in, and you have something called sensory memory. And this lasts for about 1 or 2 seconds. And if you bring your attention to that sense, then it will go into short-term memory. And then, like anything, if you practice and practice, this moves into long-term memory. And then over time, you can retrieve that information from long-term memory. So why do you need to care about memory as a software tester? So I just wanted to give one example, really, that if something is not memorable, it may be taking a user a long time to complete a task. And then this, therefore, causes frustration. And it leads back to the beginning of this statement, that if people feel or think your product is bad, they may stop using it or, recommending it to others. So I want to talk about a type of short-term memory called working memory. So this temporarily holds information and helps you solve a problem. And it depends on the control of attention and mental effort. So there's a really famous psychologist called Nelson Cohen, and he did a lot of work around the working memory capacity limits. And in his research, what he found was that people only remember 4 items or chunks at once. And one thing I want to mention is with memory, is that something is easier, we need to be thinking about recognition rather than recall. If we think about trying to, pull back memories from that long-term memory, then it's going to be, more mental effort for our users. So I want you to be thinking about recognition rather than recall. So there's a ton of stuff on the internet about usability. And if you typed in usability and memorability, there'll be loads of articles that you can read about this. So there's one that I've referenced here by the NNG group, and it talks through usability heuristics. And from that, I've got some questions that you can ask in your teams when you're creating products. Are elements, actions, and options visible? Can you complete a task on one interface? If you can think about if there's two different interfaces and a user has to remember something to put it over there, it makes it more difficult. How are we reducing the information users must remember? And are we recognizing information instead of recalling it? Great, so we've briefly looked at memory. So now look at the power of emotion-driven testing. I love this one. So there's a psychologist called Paul Ekman, and he has done a lot of work around emotions. If you go onto his website, then you can do this exercise where you match the emotion, a picture with the text. It's a really good exercise. What his work found, though, was that there are 7 universal facial expressions. So we've got anger, disgust, fear, surprise, happiness, sadness, and contempt. So what I mean by universal is that that's across the globe. So if emotions are our universal language across the globe, let's use that to our advantage in testing. And I'm going to talk through how you can do that. So there's a really good book I read quite a few years ago called 50 Quick Ideas to Improve Your Tests. And in there, it has 10 emotional paths. So I'm going to walk through these. So we've got the scary path. This is the riskiest path for your stakeholder. It's something that's really going to burn the house down. So an example could be security, maybe branding or something like that. We've got the happy path, and generally passes every time. We've got the angry path. So that is doing something, and then the application reacting to whatever you're doing. So that's an example of bad input, so maybe you get an error message. We've got the delinquent path, where we're thinking about the security. And then we've got the embarrassing path. So an example is spelling quality without the U, for example. We've got the desolate path, so we're thinking about making it really bleak as possible, nulls, blanks, or missing data. We've got Dory here from Finding Nemo, some of you may know that, the forgetful path. So the example would be to fill up memory so there's really nowhere left to store anything, and then seeing how the application handles that. We've got the indecisive path, so that is turning things on and off, going back and forth in your browser. We've got the greedy path, so that's selecting everything, having everything, and just being really greedy. And then the stressful path, thinking about sort of like the performance and load. So these are 10 emotional paths that I find quite useful. Sometimes I get quite overwhelmed when going into projects, so I kind of draw back to this to kind of help me guide my software testing. Another thing that you could do is think about who your stakeholders are. So I'm not just talking about your end user. Maybe your support engineers, your developers. And then what you could do is brainstorm what could make them feel really frustrated. So an example could be a support engineer, maybe the user's complaining about an error, and the error message is simply not clear enough. So that's one example. And what I like to do is I like to look at other products and think about what they do well. So I had the Facebook example where it was directing the user to fill out first name first. Another thing is to learn from the feedback you get from users. So a good one is to look at the bug reports that are coming in from end users and figuring that out. Get people across your business to test and get as many different perspectives as possible. And then kind of experiment with solutions. So these are my key takeaways that I've gone over with you. So we've got the structure of the brain and what each of the areas do. We've got how the brain interprets our environment. So things are registering through our senses, we're processing it and doing something with it. We've explored the types of memory and why you need to consider it when building products. And then we've got the power of emotion-driven testing to flush out bugs. And I've talked through some examples to help you. But for my closing statement, please remember who we are building for. Try and not tunnel vision into a particular area. Just remember who we are building for. So I've got some references here that you can take a look at later. But yeah, over to the questions now. I've just put my email, my LinkedIn, and my Twitter there, so feel free to get in contact with me that way. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for a nice speech. We already have the first question.
Hey, thanks a lot, Melissa. It was a really nice talk. Yesterday evening with another speaker here from the conference, we had an interesting discussion about, is AI or machine learning going to replace us testers? He was of the opinion, yes, it's happening already. I was of the different opinion. And I'm quite interested in hearing about your stance towards that, talking about emotions of the users as well. So do you think that's something that is going to happen?
In short, no, definitely not. I think there's a lot of things that AI and machine learning still need to figure out. Maybe it's possible, maybe it's not, who knows?
Okay, thank you. The trouble with machine learning is that maybe the machines have figured it out already, but we don't know it. Yeah, another one.
Hello. First of all, I'd like to compliment that you used all this knowledge you gave us in your slides, like putting things in groups of 4 and tying emotions into various things. How do you prioritize, like for example, giving groups of 4 when there are, in theory, a lot more objects or like fields on the screen of similar value? Like how do you do that like really thin cut?
That's interesting. It really depends what it is. Yeah, are you talking about simplifying it and not making it as complex?
Yes, exactly. To trim down the fat on choices to not overwhelm the customer. Like an example for a web page, like to cut down on options.
Yeah, I guess thinking about the information that you really need, and is some of it not mandatory? I probably would have thought so in this example. But yeah, if you want to talk afterwards and explore that in more detail, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
All right, more questions? I was just thinking at the time of the limit of 4, we just have 4 parallel tracks, so I think we are fine. Any more questions? We have time, and it's an interesting topic. I have, in the meanwhile, a question. So it's something that brings out emotions. So we all know when you're filling out these web forms and you fill it out and then there's a CAPTCHA.
Oh, no.
And it asks you to identify something you recognize. Usually it's school buses, traffic lights, you name it. So from the perspective of what you presented now, I mean, it's based on recognition, all good there, right? Could we do better, and how?
I think the answer is definitely. When I'm using those CAPTCHAs, sometimes I make mistakes, even though it seems really obvious. I think with this example, if it's something that your team, are finding frustrating themselves, maybe you could come up with a different way, and kind of innovation and explore different ways. I'm sure there's something else that other than a CAPTCHA that we could use. But yeah, just make it simple and easy for the users, I would say. It doesn't need to be complex. I think we overcomplicate overcomplicate things at times. So, yeah, just simplify.
Okay, so we will still click on cat pictures. Next question.
Great talk, thank you. The emotion-driven testing, I see a small issue there because my emotions may not reflect with the rest of the team. I may find some things very frustrating, everybody's still already used to that. How can we tackle that?
I think I'm the same. I'm quite biased. I am quite emotional. And that's where I find this really useful. I think getting other people involved. So there's a lot of work in the testing community about sort of ensemble testing. I think it was previously known as mob testing. That's where you can get together as a group and, test something together. So I think just getting different perspectives, getting as many people as possible involved in testing is a good thing. Because I think all of us have our biases. And this would be my bias as well, that I focus on the user and the emotions, whereas, the tooling would be my second thought.
This is a major breakthrough. Testers have emotions. Last time I spoke to a developer, they said they are heartless. So, anything more? Oh, there are plenty of hands there. Very good. Hard to see. It's so light up here. So who was it?
Hi, thank you. Very interesting topic. I was wondering, we already do quite a lot of different types of testing, and I feel that the topics you're discussing are very much UX and UI related. So I'm wondering, what's your opinion on taking this instead of testing to a designer, for example, who has more knowledge on this?
I've had this before, where, for example, I've given an idea to maybe simplify things, and they said, that's not your job, it's a UX's job. I think having those cross skills in the team, in terms of Agile teams, is actually really useful. Why can not anyone in a team provide suggestions of how to do things better, in my view? So I don't agree with it, that it's just a UX, but I understand the perspective. Not everyone does have UX in their team, though. So that's something to think about. But thank you for the question. That's really interesting.
Thank you, too.
Yeah, thank you. Finally, we found somebody to blame. So, next.
Thanks for your speech. I have a question more related to real life. Yeah, for example, if you work in an enterprise project where people don't change for decades, so for 10 years, yeah, the teams are settled, and you see the same project every day, so everyone's eyes are blurred, yeah, and how we can work with our mind to remove this blurriness and see our projects somehow from other angle. So
yeah.
it is hard to bring new people every time when you need a fresh eye. So what can we do with our brain?
Yeah, I think, so hopefully today I've given you a bit of foundation about the brain and things that you can explore. But there's a lot more to this. I think I would recommend doing your own research and learning more about this. If I find people who are interested in a particular thing, they can share that passion with the rest of the team. I do understand it's difficult, though, in teams where they haven't changed for a long time. And it's interesting when new people come along, because they bring that new perspective, don't they? And they notice bugs that maybe the older testers don't notice anymore. But yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I need to digest that one a little bit more and think about it. So yeah, feel free to come chat to me afterwards about it.
Thank you. So, we've come to the end of this session. And Melissa, thank you again for coming all the way to Tallinn.
Thank you.